Hamilton the Musical, Hitler's Rise, and Trump's America. 3 stories centuries apart, bound by one warning: democracy doesn't disappear overnight. Welcome to Carrie On, the show where we explore reinvention, self-discovery, and empowerment before, during, and after midlife. I'm your host, Carrie Murray. It's time to keep our head above the chaos and carry on. I'm going to take you on a journey where we carry on about one of my favorite things, learning history through musical theater. Honestly, there is no one that sympathizes more about the traumas and experiences of people living through World War II or the French Revolution than a musical theater kid. Everyone should go see Operation Mincemeat right now. It's on Broadway. It's hilarious. And it's also about World War II and the spy and codebreakers. So I recently went on a trip to Europe, and I have so many thoughts on this adventure, and I can't wait to tell you more about it. All right, where do I begin? So 2 weeks ago, we took a trip of a lifetime with my parents and my 15-year-old son. And what we decided to do was retrace my grandfather's footsteps from the day he landed on Normandy on D-Day all the way until he met my grandmother in London. So we went in reverse. We started in London, went down to Paris, and then went down to Normandy, where he went from Normandy to Paris to Belgium to London. So it was a really, really historical, emotional, kind of generational trip that I could not have been more excited to do. We started in London, and this was the first time my son or my dad had ever been to London. And every tour we went into, every place we went was all related to World War II. We went to the Winston Churchill rooms. We went to the HMS Belfast. We went to Bletchley Park, where the codebreakers were. Everything was based in World War II. And let me tell you how much my son blew me away with how much he knew. They would ask us the most random questions. Does anybody know the name of the machine that broke the code that saved Normandy? No. Do you? It's called the Enigma. I know now. Put me on Jeopardy. I'm ready. So as we're going through, we probably interact with 4 or 5 guides on our entire trip. And every single guide, as they met us, greeted us, welcomed us, asked where we were from in the United States. And you could see the exhale in the room when I would say, we're from California, specifically Los Angeles. And they would be like, oh, great. Let's go have a great tour. So you could tell there was this air that they were trying to fill, but they were still trying to be polite. And then it got finally to the point where my dad would just be like, we didn't vote for him. Don't blame us. Now, the interaction between Europeans and Americans now is very, very different than my last trip, which was prior to Trump being reelected. Now, it's very much like, are you okay? How are things back at home? They're unbelievably astonished by how many school shootings we have. And as we all are, that's something that blows their mind. So we're going on all these tours. And as we're kind of seeing everything in Paris, we see how these whole cities were demolished to rubble. We're seeing still the bomb sites of where all these bombs came in and they had to rebuild above it. The flowers that are now growing on where German compounds were, like you're seeing all of it. And you realize this was only 80 years ago that the entire Europe was completely taken over by the Nazis. And how did it happen? Then as every story unfolds about why did everybody agree? How did he use all the propaganda? Why did he take people's access away from education, from books, from access to money? Why did he eventually scare people into thinking, oh, we've got to get rid of the Jews. We've got to get rid of the journalists. They are threatening us being the best nation in the world, Germany, and obviously the best race. So as we're kind of making these parallels, you can't help but notice how much is what's happening today with Project 2025, especially what's happening with these stupid ass ICE raids, are the exact same things that happened in 1939. The parallels are shocking. And when you see them in real time, and you're still talking to people who were alive in World War II and experienced it in real life, to be like, wait a minute, why isn't anybody connecting these dots? Well, luckily there are. And luckily, history is preserved in Europe. They very, very much want people to understand what happened and how the Nazi regime came in. They've preserved buildings, but that also the stories that they tell are unbelievably important and valued. Even in Germany, when I was in Berlin, there's a lot of museums, there's a lot of people there that are lived this experience who want to share it. There's no silencing of this story, even though it just makes Germany look horrible. They talk about it openly. They want you to know we don't want this to happen again. And here is how you can avoid it. And would be lost to tell you that seeing the parallels being made between my 75-year-old father and my 15-year-old son is alarming. So, as such, I have decided that as a musical theater fan, when I watched the musical Hamilton, which I did on the plane over there, I made all these connections between what was happening in Hamilton the musical and what is happening today. Now, let me show you how the musical Hamilton reflects the cautionary tale the founding fathers of the Constitution were trying to convey, and how it relates to Nazi Germany and Trump's America. First, when Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote Hamilton, he wasn't just writing about the birth of America. He was writing about how democracies die and how easily he can slide from liberty to loyalty, from revolution to rule. He added some catchy tunes that get stuck in your head. And even when you're watching the musical multiple times, it takes a minute to fully comprehend the message of this cautionary tale, which is clearly being conveyed because every era, every single one, faces the same question. What happens when one man decides that he is the nation? Today, we're going to connect 3 points in history and art: Hamilton the musical, Hitler's rise, and Trump's America. 3 stories centuries apart, bound by one warning: democracy doesn't disappear overnight. It erodes one applause line at a time. So every time you hear that applause for Trump, democracy dies just a little bit more. Sounds dramatic, I know, but lucky for you, I can't afford the rights to the music of Hamilton, so you won't have to endure my singing. Solid point number 1, King George III, the monarchy. He struts out on stage, velvet and pearls, cooing into his colonies that you'll be back, soon you'll see. It's funny, right? He's petty, jealous, slightly deranged, but the laughter hides a lesson. Authoritarians always think control equals love. King George threatened to send a fully armed battalion to remind you of his love. Ba-da-da-da-da. That's powerful, pretending to be affection. And how every tyrant, every monarch, every demigod talks about the people. They don't serve them, they own them. Okay, now fast forward 150 years. Germany, 1930s, a nation humiliated by war, drowning in inflation, desperate for stability. Enter Adolf Hitler, charismatic, loud, relentless. He promised to make Germany great again, to restore its pride, crush its enemies, and silence the traitors within. People didn't hand him dictatorship in a single day. They cheered each law, each emergency decree, each little step that promised order. By the time they realized the price, the press was silenced, the courts were obedient, and the opposition was in prison. The Nazis didn't seize power violently at first. They legislated it. They normalized it. They rebranded it as patriotism. Back to Hamilton. That's what Hamilton warns us about. Every debate in that show, Hamilton versus Jefferson, Washington versus ambition, is about how much power one person should ever hold. Washington says, I'm stepping down. I'm not running for king. That single act, restraint, is what kept our very young nation from falling back into a monarchy. He understands that power has to pass through the people, not over them. That's the difference between a democracy and dictatorship. He also has the fantastic, powerful solo, One Last Time, which actually is based on a real-life farewell address from 1796. Back to Trump. And now let's talk about today's Trump's America. Project 2025, a 900-page blueprint written by conservative think tanks, lays out a plan to reshape the government under the second Trump term, to place loyalists in independent agencies, to bring the Department of Justice, the FCC, and public education directly under presidential control. Sound familiar? It should, because we've seen this play before in 1939. The Nazis called it coordination. It meant replacing anyone who wasn't loyal to the regime with someone who was. Courts, schools, newspapers, local councils all aligned. Project 2025 calls it unitary executive authority. Different words, same risk. A government that answers not to the Constitution, but to one man. Back to Hamilton. Aaron Burr sings about wanting to be in the room where it happens, the room where it happens. The hunger for power without principle is how democracies rot and die. Burr doesn't care what the deal is as long as he's a part of it. That's the seduction we're seeing again. Politicians who don't care about the truth or justice, only access. Advisors who stay silent, hoping to keep their seat at the table. That's how Germany fell to the Nazis. That's how any republic falls, not through violence first, but through quiet collaboration. Solid point number 2, the myth they are selling. And here's another echo. Both Hitler and Trump built movements around a myth. Hitler promised to restore pure Germany, to rid the nation of its supposed enemies, Jews, communists, journalists, gypsies. Trump's rhetoric frames immigrants, LGBTQ plus people, and political opponents as existential threats. He calls the press the enemy of the people. He promises retribution against traitors. He tells his followers, I am your voice. That's not democracy talking. That's monarchy rebranded for the 21st century. Who lives, who dies, who tells the story? Enter Eliza in Hamilton. Eliza asks, who tells your story? That line hits harder when you realize how every authoritarian answers it. I do. The Nazis controlled newspapers, films, schools, even children's books. They rewrote history so thoroughly that the truth itself became treason. And in America today, we see echoes. Attacks on journalists, on educators, on scientists, books banned, curriculum rewritten to erase slavery, sexuality, or dissent. Controlling the story is always step 1. Solid point number 3, democracy doesn't whisper. But here's the part Hamilton gets right, and the Nazis never could. Eliza refuses to stay erased. She builds schools, she preserves stories, she says you don't get to decide who matters. I do. That's the counterspell to authoritarianism. Memory, truth, voices that refuse to be silenced. Hello? So let's connect the dots. Hamilton showed us the warning. Germany showed us the cost. And America, right now, is the test. We have leaders who joke about being dictators for a day. Movements drafting plans to make the presidency absolute. Crowds cheering retribution, not justice. These are the tremors before the quake. Democracy doesn't collapse all at once. It collapses when we stop noticing. The founders wrote a system to protect us from kings, but systems don't save us. People do. Every time you question, every time you vote, every time you defend the truth, you keep this democracy alive. Washington said, history has its eyes on you. He was right then, and he's right now. Here's a fun fact. Hamilton debuted on Broadway August 2015. The next year, Trump becomes president, and it took home 11 Tony Awards. What musical are they going to write about this time, this era? What's happening today? And can my daughter please star in it? I'm Carrie Murray, and this is Carrie On, where we fight for freedom with rhythm, courage, and a little revolution in our hearts. Don't give up your power to anyone wearing a crown or even if it's disguised as a red hat. Stay awake, stay loud, and always keep your head above the chaos and carry on. Okay. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Carrie On. Be sure to find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And as always, like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube. And don't forget to keep your head above the chaos and carry on.